Yes, so we are continuing our discussion of philosophy of management research. I have had discussions with the dean, who has told me that he has covered up to the fourth topic. And beyond that, he has invariably covered the fifth and the sixth. Okay. So what we will do is to summarize the fifth and the sixth with your help, because since you have already done it, I don't think I have to waste much time on that. So the fifth one, you were supposed to look at the dominant philosophies within the context of what? Epistemology. Then the sixth one, you were supposed to look at the dominant philosophies also within the context of methodology and research design. Okay? Or I'm mistaken? That's right. Okay? Yes. So, but given the extensive way in which he has dealt with the fifth and the fourth in particular, I don't think I have to spend much time on that. Okay. Okay. So we'll just spend some 15 minutes to look at that. That's putting all the schools together. Okay. In 15 minutes. Then from there, we now look at the main topic for today, which is critical management studies and the critique of management research. All right, so we can go to the part.
I'll project from my side.
How are you going to do that? All right. So from the discussion on the philosophies, from your discussion, you would have realized that researchers come to the table wearing different lenses. And the lenses you wear will determine what you see. And what you see will influence your interpretation of what you see. Because if you are seeing a tree as a human being, okay, it's a tree. But whatever, whether it's vision problem or whatever, you are seeing the tree as human being. Your approach will be different. Then if you are also seeing a human being as a tree, that one is even more dangerous. Okay, so it's a human being, but you are seeing the person. You are seeing the person as a tree. So because of that, we need to look at the various assumptions that researchers bring to the table when they are conducting research in whatever field of management that we are dealing with. So that is at the realms of what we call the philosophical assumptions. Now, the philosophical assumptions namely your ontology, your epistemology, your what? I can't hear you. What are the assumptions? No, you are confusing me. See, we have the philosophical assumptions, and then we have the paradigms or the philosophical worldviews. Okay, so the philosophical assumptions are what? The ontology, epistemology, methodology, and what? Axiology. Axiology. Okay, the role of values. The role of values in research. Okay, the role of values in research. Now, these philosophical assumptions then will give birth to the philosophical worldviews, or what some will call the philosophical what, paradigms. Okay, and I would think that within the realms of the paradigms, you may have learned about 4 or 5. Which ones did you deal with? Okay. Three. Okay, did 3. Okay. So what is also often added is pragmatism. Okay, pragmatism. Even though we can make the classifications far beyond that, but these are the main elements of research paradigms. Okay? No, this is not the other one. Okay? The other one. Welcome. You are late. Yes, yes. So this one. Is not responding. Okay. All right. So this table puts all of them together, okay, so that we can see them and then compare and contrast. So if you take the first column, it relates to the assumption, the philosophical assumptions, okay, where we can talk about the ontology, the epistemology, the axiology, and then what? The methodology, okay. Now, for each of the paradigms, we can locate the distinctiveness in terms of ontology, epistemology, axiology, and then methodology. Okay, and that's what this table seeks to do. So, for instance, if you take ontology, okay, let me learn from you. What is ontology? Okay. What is ontology? Yes, John. I see you are smiling, so you want to talk. Yes. So researchers view about nature or the nature of reality. Okay? The nature of reality. What is the nature of reality? That reality exists, whether or not we perceive it, or reality is constructed in our minds. Okay? So whether or not reality exists or not will depend on the paradigm that you pursue. Okay? So if I am a positivist, then the clearest stance when it comes to ontology will be that reality exists externally. In other words, I can only pretend that it doesn't exist, but it exists. Whether I believe that it exists or not, it exists. In other words, we all can see that there's a world. Okay? Whether we believe that the world is there or not, the world is there. So in other words, the existence of reality does not depend on the interpretation of the researcher. It is an objective reality. In other words, it is something that you can see, feel, and touch. Okay? So we don't need to debate it. That's basically what positivism talks about. We don't need to debate it. It's there. Okay? It's either X or it's Y. Okay? So there is a clear way of looking at reality and its constituent factors. Now, if you look at realism, there are two main worldviews under this, where we can have the realists and what we call the critical realists. Okay? So the realists, they will say that yes, reality exists. And reality exists within the limits of what we can see. In other words, so long as we can see it, then it is real. Okay? Once we can observe it, it is real. Now, critical realists, on the other hand, believe that what we see and our feelings can sometimes deceive us. Okay? Because you may feel that a situation exists, when in reality, such situations don't exist. So the issue of fear is simply a feeling. Okay, when you get afraid, it's just a feeling. It doesn't mean that there's in actuality a fearful situation that arises. But it is out of the readings of your emotions that sometimes those fears arise. Okay? Because you can enter into a room and then you see something that is scary like this. And then you jump and cry snake. But when you switch on the light, you see that it's not snake. It's a bird. So until and unless you look at the situation critically, you will think that that is the reality, when in truth, it is not. Okay? Then, when you look at the interpretivists, they would believe that reality is socially constructed. Okay? In other words, you can create it. You can create your own reality. It is not cast in stone. That is why they would believe in multiple truths. Okay? Because there is nothing like what? An objective truth. And it is within this context that all these so-called LGBT whatever thing is coming up. Because from the positive point of view, we know that you are either a man or a woman. You are either male or what? female. And what do they say? They say that no, that what we call sex is not determined at birth. That is, it's determined socially out of your interactions. Then you can create your gender by yourself. In other words, you can be a man from the perspective of what? The positivist, but you say that you are a woman. So in which case, they will contest any kind of argument that will say that sex is an objective terminology. So they will say that it is a fluid terminology. In other words, it's not constant, it's not binary. You cannot just say male or what? Female. So you see that now when you are filling forms, they will say male, female, or don't want to disclose. Okay? It's out of the argument that reality is subjective and there can be multiple realities. Okay? So that is, then we have pragmatism. Pragmatism simply argues that let's go with what works. In other words, they are not committed to any doctrine. Okay, if it is positivism that works, I'll go for it at any point in time. If it is interpretivism that works, I'll go for it. In other words, you go with what works. Okay, so they have no dedication to a particular school of thought or a particular paradigm. So, which means that when you are employing pragmatism, in the same research, you may have a combination of worldviews. So when it comes to this particular issue, I would go with the positivists. Then, but when it comes to this one, I'll go with what? The interpretivists. So whatever works at whatever point in time, that is what you go with. Okay? So they wouldn't mind. If somebody says reality is external, they'll go by it. If they say reality is multiple, they'll go by it. So long as it suits what? Their agenda, then they are fine with it. Then we come to epistemology. What is epistemology? Yes, the way you are smiling, you want to answer it.
It's how we go about finding out knowledge.
Okay, so how we go about what? Knowing. In other words, what constitutes valid knowledge? That's a question of epistemology. For us to say that a particular knowledge that is pursued in a field is regarded valid, that comes from the realms of epistemology. Okay, so what constitutes valid knowledge to a positivist will not constitute valid knowledge for an interpretivist. And that is why there is always conflict between especially the interpretivists and then the positivists. Because the positivists will say that once it cannot be measured, don't bother yourself about it. Yes, if we can't measure it, if we can't quantify it, then we must as well forget it. The interpretivist will say no. Life is not about what? Figures. Life is about what? Meaning. 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 The meaning, the perceptions we attach to issues. That is what is important. Okay? So the lens will influence how you go about obtaining knowledge. Okay, so in terms of epistemology, the positivists will go strictly objectively. So knowledge has to be obtained and pursued objectively. Because why? Because it has to flow from the ontology. So that's one thing you must know, that you cannot take an objectivist ontology and now come and take a subjectivist epistemology. No, you are contradicting yourself. Okay? So once you choose an objectivist ontology, you must choose an objectivist epistemology. And that would also influence what you perceive to be whether research is value-free or what? Value-laden, which is your axiology, which will now influence your methodology, which is your research what? Design and data collection techniques and analysis. Whether you are going quantitative, you are going what? Qualitative, or you are going what? Mixed method. Okay, so they are very interconnected. So, in terms of the epistemology for the positivists, strictly they say that positive or objective. We have to be objective. In other words, knowledge, the quest for knowledge is an objective process. What does that mean? What that means is that the researcher is completely detached from the instruments of the research. In other words, you take yourself out, your views, your opinions, out of what? The research process. And that's why in the past, you would see that in most of the positivist writings, when they are writing, they will not use personal pronouns like I, we, etc. They will now rather say that the research found that. They will say they will not say I found that. No. You have to remove yourself from what? Let the research speak for itself. Okay? But over time, that has changed a bit. So positivists now try to use we and all that. Okay. Even though strictly the positivists try as much as possible, whether it is in the data collection process, the narration of the writing, they try to avoid their personality having a role to play in the research process. That is contrasted with interpretivism, which would say that no, the researcher, his assumptions, his values, his perceptions have roles to play in the research process. In other words, in most of those interpretivist lenses, the researcher is also a subject of their research. So for them, it is almost impossible to detach yourself from the research process and say that your values will not have anything to play in terms of the research. Now, when it comes to the realists, they would say that what is important is to ensure that within the research process, we ensure credibility. Because remember that they look at reality in terms of what? Sensations and perception. Sensations. What you see is what you get. Okay? So they would emphasize credibility, Because once the data collection is credible, you credibly gather data, then we can say that you are pursuing a good course or the right course in terms of gathering knowledge. Okay? So that's their perspective. Then, when it comes to pragmatism, their epistemological view is that go with whatever works. Okay? If at a point in time we have to be objective, we'll take that path. If we have to be what? Subjective, we'll take that path. Well, what will ring a bell in terms of methodology for you, which we shall come to, will be that it means that pragmatics is more likely to use a mixed method approach. Okay, it's likely to use a mixed method approach where one part is quantitative, another part is what? Qualitative. So he puts them together. Okay, so he would pursue a positivist lens for the quantitative side, and then what? He now will pursue the constructivist or interpretivist lens when it comes to the qualitative side, and then now put them together. Now, and that brings us to the role of values in research, which we call the axiology. The positivists will say that values have no role to play in the research process. In other words, research is value-free, completely value-free. Now, when it comes to the realists, they will say that no, the issue is that research is value-laden. It's full of value. The entire chain of the research process is filled with what? Values. The interpretivists will say that research is value-bound. In other words, by nature, research is influenced by what? Values. Okay? The pragmatists will not mind whichever way, but they tend to tilt more towards the value-ladenness of research, but they will really not mind. Now, in terms of the methodology and then the research design, for the positivists, the implication is that when you are going to do your data collection, you have to use largely what we call probability sampling techniques. Remember, we have what? Probability sampling techniques and what? Non-probability sampling techniques. So if I see that you say you are a positivist and you now come and tell me that you want to be using the what? Haphazard sampling and all those non-probability sampling, snowballing and all that, then I know that you don't know what you are doing. Okay? So the positivists must use probability-based sampling, and then the sample size has to be large, because the positivists will seek to make generalizations. And to make generalization, you must have what? A large sample size. So that's why it will be difficult for a positivist to go and interview 5 people and say that he is doing research. His peers will laugh at him. Okay, so he can't do that. So sample size has to be large. The sampling technique, you have to use probability-based sampling. And then when it comes to the data analysis approach, it has to be quantitative. Quantitative analysis. Okay? And you have to go to the full length in terms of the quantitative analysis. Because you can't tell me that you are a positivist and then all I see is that you are using descriptive statistics, percentages, frequencies, pie charts. That's all. No. You have to move beyond that. Because everybody does that. No, so everybody can do frequency, can do pie chart, can do bar chart. No, so you have to go deep into what? Inferential statistics to now test hypotheses so that you can arrive at what? Some scientifically valid conclusions. Okay? Now, when it comes to the realism, in terms of the approach, qualitative, quantitative, they are fine. Okay? They don't really also mind. Okay? For the interpretivists, usually qualitative is the main approach. Okay? Because the issue is that you are dealing with what we call tick data. Tick data. Because you are interviewing somebody for 1 hour or 2 hours, and every word that comes out is data. Okay, so you will find them recorded so that they can transcribe. So that has implication for the sample size. So an interpretivist can just interview one person, and that's a research. He is done.
Yes.
Yes, it's accepted. A single case study. Yes. So for if I want to understand how Akufo-Addo feels about his 4-year reign, that's the first step. Who do I interview? Himself. And that's enough. My only problem is how to get access to him. Okay?
Nobody, except you, can give you.
Yes, that can give you that. Okay, so it's a single case study. So once I interview him, I gather my data, that's all, I'm done. So you now go and sit down, transcribe or use, now we have softwares that are able to even transcribe them for you and all that, okay? Then you can now go into the analysis and all that. Yes, please.
Maybe for purpose of reviewing your literature or your paper.
Yes.
Your paper will land in the hands of a post team. In this case, how will they assess your work?
There's trouble for you. There's trouble for you. Okay, it happens. It happens. Yes.
And in fact, they went and landed in the hands of the software that felt that I used the sample size in Delhi. Then the person feels that 350 is so too small.
Yeah. So it's often a big problem. It's a big problem. So usually we try to help, especially the graduate school, in choosing external examiners because we have been having that problem. Okay. So if I am a positivist, then I supervise you. You are done. And then they now take your thesis to an interpretivist to assess it. How are you going to pass? You can pass. You can pass. And I experienced that with one of my students. Okay? So you are interested in the calculations and figures and all that. The guy is interested in meanings. So he will just dismiss all the tables and all that. He will dismiss them. They mean nothing to him. When they mean everything to me. Okay? So it's a good point that you have made. So we try as much as possible to ensure that when you submit your thesis, the external examiner and then the internal, not just only external, also internal, they must be within that same line of thinking. Otherwise, it usually brings about conflicts. Okay. So, interpretive is small sample size. And as I mentioned earlier, for the pragmatic mixed method, you can use a mixed method or you can use multiple methods, a combination of different methods and mixing at different levels of the research process. Now, so this should be able to guide you, because within this process, you yourself should begin to see which one will suit you in terms of your approach to research, because it's very important. If you don't choose where you belong, it will be difficult to do a very good research work. Otherwise, you end up mixing them. Okay, so you have to choose your stance. Unfortunately, for some disciplines, it's chosen for them. Okay, it's largely chosen for them, especially those doing finance. It's largely chosen. Okay, we have not yet embraced all these interpretivist kind of thing. Okay, even though there are some arguments coming up. Okay, accounting, they have done well. There are a lot of interpretivist orientations within accounting research, but finance has been very orthodox. Because the issue is that most of the journals within that field are orthodox in nature. They are positivists. So if you want your paper to be published in that fora, then you have to dance to their tune. So that's one of the main problems, because we don't have finance journals that are publishing interpretivist frameworks. If you send it there, they say, this one to what is that? They don't appreciate it. But the other management disciplines, they are more flexible. Okay, so you have to be aware of some of these things when you are making your choices. Any question or contribution? Yes, please.
The positivists, you have to, your data has to be large. So I want to find out what constitutes a large data. What percentage of your population constitute a large sample size?
Yes, thank you. So there are several frameworks for determining that. You know that the best will be to take the entire population, not to do a census. Okay, but where a census is not possible, then you have to use what? A sample size determination formula. There are several formulas. There are also tables that you can use to determine the appropriate sample size, given your what? Error, allowable error, and then your level of precision. Okay, so there are sample size determined. And at this level, if you must choose a sample size, it has to depend on a calculation, a clearly spelled out calculation of how you arrive at that sample. Otherwise, you have problems, especially those that will pursue quantitative approaches. Okay? Usually those that are within the other paradigm, some of them, they would say that they don't have sample size. They will just be interviewing until they reach saturation. So the sample size is achieved when they realize that they are no longer getting new information from the interviews. So they have reached saturation. So that ends it. Now, a positivist will not understand this. And this is one of the sources of conflict. Because they want to just indicate how many you are interviewing and how did you arrive at it. So there are various ways that we can deal with that. Muda. Yes.
Between realist and pragmatist.
Yes.
Some
a
have
word of
often
difference.
treated them as
In terms of what?
that some have treated them as one and
No, they are not one and the same. He's asking whether there is a difference between the realist and then the pragmatist. There's a difference. Okay? The realists believe in the fact that our sensations influence how we interpret. One, the nature of reality, and two, what constitutes valid knowledge. The critical realists then add to it and say that sometimes we can be misled by our feelings and by what we see. Okay? But as for the pragmatists, they go with anything. Okay, they cut across all three paradigms. In other words, they believe in what works. Okay, what works. If it is realism that works, let's go by it. If it is positivism that works, we go by it. If it is constructivism, we go by it. Okay. All right. Yes, please.
You mentioned that with the interpretivists, they are largely qualitative. They are largely qualitative.
Yes.
I want to find out if it's possible to triangulate in terms of data collection and data analysis.
Yes. Regardless of the worldview, you can triangulate. So when it comes to positivists, for instance, they will not call it triangulation. So they will call it robustness checks. Okay? They will look at different ways of measuring the same thing, different ways of analyzing the same thing, and see whether they will all lead to the same outcome. Okay? But you may want to triangulate from the data collection, and then your interviews, the diversity of people you interview and all that, and bring all of them together as a means of triangulating your findings. Okay, so regardless of the paradigm, there's some form of triangulation that may be required, especially at this level, for us to meet the epistemological standards. Because that's always the question that arises at this level. Whether what you have generated is valid knowledge. That's an epistemological question. So the PhD process, what you are actually seeking to convince examiners is that what you have done constitutes valid knowledge, regardless of your worldview. Whether you use the positivist lens, the realist, the interpretivist, or the pragmatist. So we are going to assess the knowledge you have generated within the particular lens that you are looking at it. That's why I said it is important for you to choose your lens. Because once you choose your lens, you will know how to arm yourself for any kind of questions or debate that can arise out of how you have you have pursued your quest for knowledge. Okay, any other? Before we move to our main topic. Yes, please.
In regard to data collection,
Yes.
where you need to mention that any tool Code of finance.
That in the field of finance, they are basically positivists because they want to see that the sample size is large. My question then is there a point in time where data collection or in the field of finance, they can accept the pragmatic point of view in terms of the mixed method?
Yes,
Using both
yes, they
the
can accept.
quantitative and qualitative.
Once you accept, you meet the quantitative side, you can add qualitative.
Oh, okay.
That one is an addition you are bringing.
Bring it, okay.
But they will not force you to do that.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Then even that, there is some degree of constructivist work in finance, just that it's not much. Yeah. Usually why supervisors are reluctant is that they don't want the situation where you generate the knowledge and you can't publish it. Okay, you send it to a journal, they reject it. You send it here, they reject it. That is, your efforts are not being rewarded. But we create some small room for those who want to do interpretivism and all that, because that is still even within what we call behavioral finance, where they now give room to the role of what? Non-rational behavior or sentiments, what we call sentiments in the research process. Okay, so if your supervisor agrees that you should do interpretivism, that one we can't stop doing. Yes. Now we want to look at what we call critical management studies, or CMS, and the critique of management research. Okay. Now, you can look at critical management studies as another worldview. Okay, so look at it as a worldview or as a movement that has emerged in response to issues arising from the dominant worldviews. Okay, and we shall soon come to understand what critical management studies is all about. Okay, then so we'll look at what is critical management studies, what it entails, what are the parameters, what are the ideologies, how do you go about critical management studies, and then lastly, we'll look at future research directions under this. Okay. So basically, first we'll look at the role of power and ideology in management research. Then we'll look at the critical management studies criticism or critique of dominant paradigm. And then we'll look at emancipatory research. What is that? Okay. And then the future of management research based on this. Now, critical management studies is actually a recent development. And if you check the literature, the first time it was used as a term was 1992. I believe by that time, or some were not born. All of us were born. Okay, so it's recent, very recent. Okay, even though there were some discussions around issues that we could term as critical management studies, but in terms of the formalization, of the movement, it was an edited collection, what you call a book series, that had the title Critical Management Studies, which initiated that subfield of philosophy in management called Critical Management Studies, CMS for short. And the reasons behind the movement and the appeal of critical management studies are listed below. First was the rise of managerialism, as it related mainly to what we call the New Right. The New Right movement are some movements that occurred mainly in the United Kingdom, the US, advocating for free market, liberalization, and all that. We know that that has created a lot of power imbalances, which we shall come to know has to do with what we call hegemony. Okay, so those power imbalances, boss-servant kind of relationship, implied in the New Right movement and the modern day management actually caused the emergence of critical management studies. Added to this is the issue of globalized capitalism, as well as what we call the crisis of Western management. Okay? You know that globalized capitalism will focus more on what? Extracting rent, extracting profit. Okay? Rather than looking after the welfare of workers. Okay? Which to critical management studies is a big problem. Okay? Then, crisis of positivism. You will see that in the debates, the emergence of critical realism, interpretivism, actually pose serious crisis for positivism. Because those later arrivals, and here I'm talking about interpretivism and the likes, basically try to say that the approach that is employed by positivism is flawed because there is nothing objective in this world. Okay, so that approach of always thinking about something as being objective was brought to question by interpretivists and critical realists, among others. Then also, Marxist ideas began to be infused into the study of social science. And Marxism will question the existence of what? Class differences within society. Okay? Then the last factor is the growth in business schools, especially around the 1980s. A lot of business schools sprang up. Or previously, business schools were basically part of economics faculty. But with time, so it was difficult to actually get people with PhD in business, especially accounting where the notion was just that go and charter, get your professional qualification and you are fine. Okay, but things have changed. I remember that the time I was doing my PhD, there were very few PhDs in accounting, even at the University of Ghana. Okay? So it was difficult to produce a PhD holder in accounting in Ghana because we didn't have professors. So most of them had to go outside to be supervised to come back. Okay. But with time, this has changed, such that almost all the subfields of management, we now have a lot of personnel. So then what is critical management studies? First, we must know that it is interdisciplinary. Okay, so it does not rely on only one field. So borrow from sociology, borrow from anthropology, borrow from philosophy, borrow from psychology, borrow from sociology, put all of them together because you need them in order to address challenges in management. Okay, so that what critical management studies will seek to do is to uncover power dynamics that exist at the workplace. Because at the workplace, there is power play, whether you like it or not. We have bosses, we have servants. So there is an established hierarchy at the workplace that has its own dynamics. It will determine who gets paid and how much they are paid, who gets promoted, how they are promoted, and when they are promoted. Traditional management paradigm, in particular positivism, will not care about this. It will not care whether there's boss, there's whatever. The problem is just maximize profit, subject to a budget constraint, that's all. Whether the workers are happy, they are smiling, their faces are frowned, that would not be important. Okay? It is these that critical management studies challenges. So it will seek to expose inequalities that exist. Why is it that the same role, a man is performing it and a woman is also performing it, but the man is paid higher than the woman, even though they have the same qualification? Tell me the reason. So CMS will question this as an inequality that exists in society that has to be addressed. Okay? So they would also look at social injustices. How come that resources are automatically handed over to some people? So for instance, in northern region, we have chiefs who are in charge of land and they sell the land. Who gave the land to them? Who gave the land to them? It's the people who gave the land to them, and they are selling the land to the people again. So that's some form of social injustice that exists within organizations and society. And that is what critical management studies seek to address. So you can look at it as an approach to research that will seek to reveal the hidden things. Who is suffering? Who is getting hurt? Who is getting discriminated? Who is being trampled upon? Who has not received his due? Who is being exploited?
So studies that seek to uncover these come under the paradigm of critical management studies. And for a lot of you, critical management studies will be a very good lens for you. Those, especially those that are doing HR and all that. Okay? Yes, please.
Like you mentioned, that those who are doing HR. The power dynamics here, most often, when it comes to organizations,
People want to look at importance of certain role. We are all managers,
Yes.
but because the finance manager can attend board meeting, he sees himself to be more important than other managers.
Sure.
Is that what we are looking at in terms of power dynamics?
That's a power imbalance.
Okay.
So critical management studies will seek to fix that.
Okay.
Why is the finance director considered more important than director of works, for instance? Why? Is the librarian considered more important than somebody who is in charge of stores? Okay? Is it just because of the name that is attached to the office that gives the person the power? So critical management studies will seek to confront this.
Will it then be right for me to say that CMS is typically kind of linked to the interpretivist approach?
Naturally.
Okay,
Naturally. Yes.
okay.
Okay. That
Yes.
in terms of their ontology and epistemology, that's where they are driving to. Okay, so they have no problem with the interpretivists. Their problem largely is with the positivists. Okay? Yes. So what CMS will do is to offer alternative perspectives to the dominant paradigm by trying to look at how management research can highlight social responsibility. You will see that previously, firms were not concerned about environment. They were basically concerned about profit. The concept of the triple bottom line has just been a recent development. Okay? So it is critical management studies that has now brought all these issues to the fore, such that now almost every big organization, as part of their budget, they will say they have what? Corporate social responsibility. Because critical management studies will require that the organization should not only seek to cater to its workers and itself, in other words, to make profit, but it must attend to what? Environmental and social issues that are within the context of that it is operating. Okay, so those issues of CSR all come under critical management studies. And I think accounting, you have a lot of that as well. Okay, a lot of issues. I think your presentation has something to, or yes. So they will look at ethical conduct and then justice in organizations. So those that embark on critical management studies may try to look into gender discrimination. Okay. So in economics, we deal with this particular aspect where we
what we often do is to look for what? Gender wage differential. There are a lot of studies on that, gender wage differential. Why is it that females earn less, even when the qualification is the same? Yes. So there are a lot of studies. Then exploitation. We have a lot of exploitation at the workplace. Okay. We have issues of extortion at the workplace. Issues of abuse at the workplace. So all these things can be investigated and come under critical management studies. Okay. Sorry. That is okay. Now, what are the common threats that connect various aspects of critical management studies? There are three main propositions: denaturalization, anti-performativity, and then reflexivity. I think you have done reflexivity. So that one, you tell me what it is. I think that was even last. For critical management, The boss. And we have subordinates who are down there and have this sign.
Hello? 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 Yeah. Hello?
Where it's frozen. Now, the second core proposition of CMS is anti-performativity, which relates to the fact that, yes, please. Yes.
Some of them, things are social consulting, where you have the human doing things.
Yeah.
All about statement. Application.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that it is social in the sense. If you look at elsewhere in Europe, okay, let's zero it down to our homes, where socially we think that woman should be doing the cooking and all that. Elsewhere, if you find yourself in your own class, your wife, sometimes the wife will do more to cook everything, but they should not be coming back to cook anything. That is just something. Recently, we saw President of France, Macron,
Yes.
making Prime Minister. And like he said, this long or long man. And the fact that they think that it's only for the long man.
Yes.
Yeah, so all that I'm like saying that some of this there is a nice that this person is the young man, best experience, the person cannot handle this. This person is really man. And so she cannot handle this. Even if she's handling that position, the competence level is expected to be lower than that.
That's naturalization. So that's naturalization. So critical management study seeks to denaturalize that. And then now say that it is we human beings who have made it so. It shouldn't be like that. And it's not like that by nature. So that's where they are coming from. Okay. Yes.
How to identify naturalization and organizational culture?
Yes.
How do you consider it?
What is organizational culture? Yes. Yes. So that's what I'm saying.
critical management studies seeks to question that. Because that's the dominant management approach. Okay, it's seeking to question that, where we are thinking that the hierarchical structure is what should be the case. So we have somebody at the top that we call what the CEO, and there's somebody down there, then another, then another. That's what they are seeking to question. Their argument is that it creates a power imbalance. You understand that? So in that circle of power imbalance, there will be discrimination. There will be exploitation, among other issues that would cause some people not to get their fair share of their cake. Yes.
If you look at those organizational structures,
Yes.
naturally, we have these structures set up in that one, top level management, middle, and then lower level.
So they are telling you, denaturalize that. That's what critical management is telling you. Studies is telling you. Denaturalize that. Reconstruct the organogram so that everybody is the same. Yes. You can assign the rules, fine. But don't consider one person to be more important than the others. Even when you are taking decision per critical management study, you have to bring everybody together. So it shouldn't be the one at the top who is taking all the decisions and forcing it down on the workers, even though they don't even agree with what he's saying. Okay. Yes.
I think therefore discouraging studies that concentrate on issues that tend to preserve this natural phenomenon.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So as much as possible, they want to dismantle those natural structures. And you see that critical management studies will appeal so much to the LGBTQ people. Okay, that's what they want to hear. Okay, that no discrimination, we are all equal. Okay, every human being should be given equal right. Whatever I want to do, allow me to do it. Whether you think that your religion doesn't accept it or not, that's your problem. But allow me to express and fulfill my full freedoms. Yes. Okay. So when we talk about anti-performativity, you see that in the modern corporation, as I mentioned, the focus is on how to convert input to output. That's what we call performativity. So that one we're talking about efficiency. So the focus is, if you have capital, labor, output, and all that, how best do you combine them in order that you can get the maximum output possible? That's performativity. So critical management studies is anti-performativity. Because they are saying that between the process of converting the inputs into output, there are some factors. A lot of water goes under the bridge. How much did you pay the workers? Have you provided enough safeguards for their safety? Because these are, say, mining workers. They are in the mines. Then you don't provide them with safety equipment. They go underground and then the pit collapses on them. In the process of trying to convert input to what? Output. They lose their lives. So what they are saying is that the focus should not be so much on what? The performance. But everything that adds up, whether we can measure it or not, in the process of producing the output, we have to consider them. Issues of fairness, issues of equity, issues of justice, and all that have to be addressed. And that is what we call anti-performativity. The last one, oh boy, is what you want to help me to explain. Okay. So interpretivists often talk about reflexivity, because here we say that the researcher who has written about the organization, his own opinion is part. Take note that his own opinion, his own views, his assumptions have influenced the way he's interpreting the research. So, critical management studies would caution that we must recognize that accounts of the organization and management are mediated by the assumptions, they are mediated by the philosophies, the ethics of the researcher. In other words, we cannot detach the researcher from the research process. The researcher is both what? A subject and a participant, okay, in the research process. Now, so if you look at what we were discussing in terms of current, the dominant management paradigm, we see that it seems to shift power towards the manager. Okay, so everybody is beholden to the manager. You want to catch the attention of the manager. Because once you catch the manager's attention, that's all. Your promotion is guaranteed. Okay? Now, so critical management studies will seek to call to question the power relations, how we concentrate power in the hands of managers, leaving the subordinates weak and susceptible to manipulation, discrimination, and abuse. Okay. So that around the 20th century, several doctrines arose which can come under the umbrella of critical management studies. There are more than this. These are just a list. Okay? So if you do further readings, you will find more. Among them is what we call labor process theory, which tries to examine how people work. How do people work? Okay? What are the conditions under which they work? Now, if they work, who is the one controlling their work? How are they supervised? Okay? Then, if they are working, what skills are they using in their work? Are they the right people that have been hired to do that work, for which we expect this amount of output from them? After they have worked, how are they paid? Because there are situations, I've learned in situations where some employers, when it is pay time, you will count the money and then he will spit on it and give it to the employee. That's your pay. So how are they paid? Are they paid in dignity? or they are paid in a debasing manner. Okay? So all that comes under what we call labor process theory. Then feminism. There are a lot of feminist organizational studies that will look at the role of gender in the organization. How are women treated, okay, compared to men? How those influence outcomes in society all come under feminist organization studies. So one of the PhDs that I just prepared, he dealt with what we call agency differentials. Agency differentials between income earning and non-income earning women. And when we talk about agency here, we are talking about power to make decisions on your own, and the power to have a voice, the power to self-determine. Okay, so if there's a household, one woman, she earns income, the other woman, she doesn't earn income. How does that influence their voices? In other words, which of them will speak and the husband will listen? The one that earns income and the one. Okay, so that comes under feminist organizational studies. And within economy, we have what we call gender economics. Okay, gender is a field on its own that deals with gender dynamics and resource allocation in society. Okay. Then we have radical humanist ideas. Okay. So for them, they would emphasize what we call complete independence of the self. Complete independence. The fact that the human being can be completely free to make their choices without looking over their shoulders, whether somebody is going to pass anti-LGBT or whatever. Okay, so they are completely independent in terms of their choices, in terms of their decisions, and whatever they think is good for them. But we must know that so long as you are living in a society that is governed by law, there cannot be complete freedom. Because you cannot have the freedom to kill yourself, which is called suicide. Because suicide is a freedom. The freedom to kill yourself is suicide. But the law cannot allow you to do that. Or lawyer.
If you are tempted, you are not successful, it's a criminal.
Yeah, itself is criminal. Just making the attempt. Okay? That one you need your maker. Yes.
Where they give an opportunity for one to do the job when you are.
Yes, they are lost. Is that not it? Those societies are lost. Yes. 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 Yes.
There is a problem. You make sure that you attempt.
Yes. It's not a problem. Yeah.
And it becomes a crime. So because if you know that when you fail, it will become a crime, then you make sure that.
So the issue is that, the question is that if somebody goes to steal and at the point of stealing they are caught, is it still a crime?
This is a crime because they may want to get the.
Aha, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The intention is to kill. It's the same thing. So I support it. Yes.
Critical management does it override this other story of concept of power distance,
Power distance.
where they have the under cross-cultural management. Well, something we call high power context and low, as you were narrating, where an organization, they believe that somebody must be the boss. That's the high power context. And the low side is that the work must be done, it should be flat. And then where we have feminism and then masculine, where they believe that some women cannot perform some functions, especially in this Arab world. And then in this Western world, they believe that what woman can do, a man can do, woman can do better.
So they have embraced critical management studies. Yes. They have embraced critical management studies. That's why they have gotten to the level that they say that what man can do, woman can do. But they are going the extreme. Don't say can do better. Because then you are now flipping the. You can understand that. Yes, so it's completely against those power distances that are created. Let's close that distance. Now let's share the power. Yeah. Yes.
If you consider the,
Yeah.
let me say,
Yes.
it may have its own points. Even though CMSC naturalize that kind of power imbalances. But if you look at it at the flip side, it might also create some of that challenging organizational development in a sense that where you make the power horizontal, everybody is on the same line. Then I see lots of accountability that nobody is checking anybody, or you don't have somebody accountable for another person.
Why?
That person.
Is there not somebody in charge of monitoring?
You might have somebody.
It will not, CMS will not say that don't appoint somebody to monitor. Yes.
Yes, you would have somebody who does monitoring.
Yes.
And would acquit. But at the end of the day, a certain judgment has to be.
Sure.
And obviously that judgment will not have to collect. Because
why is it not collective?
Maybe the way you look at the events will differ from
Meet together and then reconcile. That's the area that we call the emancipatory research. Set them free. Okay, empower the voiceless. You understand that? We may or may not agree with them. I'm not saying I agree with that because I'm just teaching it. I have to defend it. It doesn't mean that I agree.
Yes, Prof. I agree with him with what he said. But in as much as I agree with him, I think if he's speaking on the basis of organogram and organizational structure, and then of course, person specification and job specification should also play out, such that if you know what you have to do, then it comes with responsibility, who you should be, responding to. So we can have that horizontal line, but there will still be that kind of interrelationship. Yes, those structures within the organization.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we also have what we call critical versions of postmodernism. Okay, which, because we've seen that the rise of modernism has relegated to the background indigenous ways of doing things. Okay? Indigenous voices have been silenced. Okay? So we have more or less been westernized. And to think that it is what is Western that is the best. So even when I want to buy shirt, I want to ask whether it is made in Italy or Germany, but not in Ghana. So post-modernism looks at that, okay, tries to address that. Okay. So the discussion then is all basically around the role of power in management research. That's basically what it is. And when we talk about power, we are just looking at the capacity to produce or prevent change. If you can prevent change from happening, then you have power. So the security there, they have power. Because they can prevent me from entering my office. They have power, but they don't know they have power. Okay. So if you have the power to prevent or to produce change, or the capacity to prevent or produce change, then you have power. And that is why politicians look for it. Because you think that it's a great resource to have power to produce change in Ghana or to prevent change in Ghana. So the whole exercise of becoming a president or otherwise is either to what? Produce or prevent change. That's all. They will not be happy with you. Now, but in management research, when we talk about power, we are just talking about ability to influence research agenda, the methodology and the outcome. And there are a lot of factors that can play here. Who determines the agenda? Who determines what we should research on? Okay? So that is important. Because sometimes when you are looking for funding, it's the funders who determine the agenda. Because as I'm here, if I see a call that will say that, oh, if you can do research A, B, C, D in your area, I will give you this amount of dollars, I'll jump in. Even though it's not in my research plans for 2024. But the money has determined the agenda. Okay? That's how it works. Yes, you do it. You do it. If they say qualitative, you do it. So you not ask about the paradigm. It's the money you how much is involved. Okay? Go out for the paradigm, you can always shift. So we must be aware of power dynamics, which can occur in several forms in terms of institutional authority. That's what we were just explaining, the power distance. Okay? It's institutionalized, access to resources. Who gets what? I just talked about places where they say women don't own lands. Okay? That is an access problem. Okay? Then control over decision making. Who makes decisions? Who has a voice in the community? Okay? and living in the house. So there are examples provided here, research, how research can be influenced, and that's what I just gave. The funders can influence, and sometimes even the big corporations, they will influence people to conduct research and say that it is not good to eat egg. Meanwhile, that's not scientific. You can eat egg every day and have no problem. But they will tell you that if you eat egg, you get cholesterol. So God didn't know that before creating egg. So most of those big companies, they engage in that. They will pay people. Sometimes they just falsify the outcome and publish it in very good journals so that to promote their business. If they tell you that egg is not good, you look for another protein that they are selling, which is more expensive than egg, and you'll be struggling. Then, within the same, we talked about power. Then we need to talk about ideology, which also has an influence on management research. And by ideology, we are looking at beliefs and values, and also assumptions, how they are brought to bear on the researcher and the actions taken by the researcher and all that. Okay? Now challenging the dominant paradigm. We know where the challenge is. The challenge is with positivism and then liberalism. Because the critical management studies, they don't have a problem with interpretivism, because it syncs with what they are talking about. Socially constructed reality and socially derived meanings. Okay? Their main problem has to do with positivism. Okay, so they are then posing a challenge, positivism and neoliberalism. We'll look at them very quickly. Now, their issue is that these methodologies, mainly positivist and then the neoliberal methodologies, they do not look at perceptions. They do not look at meanings. All they want to look at is objective and quantifiable outputs, which to the critical management study aspect is not the best to go. The neoliberal guys will focus more on profit making. How do we make profit? Okay. So you will see from here that the criticism is within the context of the fact that positivism is basically prioritizing measurement. And they will look mainly organizational performance. How do we increase profit? They will not be concerned about the employee welfare. How they are faring is not a problem, whether when they are working, they are stressed or not. So the positivists will not be talking about stress management at the workplace. That's your problem. All they are concerned is bring the profit. How much profit did you make? You bring the money, you count it, and then they deduct what? Cost from what? Revenue, and then declare whether profit is made or loss is made. And they monitor the margins. Okay? So, in terms of the neoliberal agenda, they look at free markets. You see that this falls in line with the World Bank thinking.
they are pursuing the neoliberal agenda. You say that free market. In other words, so they will say that electricity, what will now Ghana has to now do is that we have to allow the market to determine the price. So now I think every quarter, right? They have to review what electricity prices to take care of inflation and then exchange rate losses and all that. So privatize the enterprises. Government has no business doing business. Deregulations in the energy sector. Yeah? Those are the ideas of neoliberalism. How that will influence job security, they don't care. So now government cannot hire. IMF doesn't care. Don't hire. How that will lead to labor unrest, they don't care. Come and deal with it. That's why the government is running around quenching fires all over the place. They go and quench this one. So sometimes I pity the government. It's not. So they will usually advocate downsizing, lean government. And unfortunately, both former President Mahama and then Dr. Bawumia have agreed to downsize. So that one, John Mahama says 60 ministers. Bawumia says 50. Mahama, 60 is too much. I'll make it 50. Whether that is going to lead to job security issues or not, they don't care. Okay? So critical management studies seeks to basically critique these stances of free market without due notice of employee well-being in the entire process. So you would find that they will embrace Marxist thinking, which seeks to dismantle class structure between the royals. I just mentioned we have the royal family. You go to Britain, the royal family, for them, their destinies are secured by nature. So once you are born into it, that's all. That's all you need. To pray that they will born you into a royal family. And that's all. And it's the same thing in Africa. Most of the paramount, once you are the son of Ashanti, that's all. You don't need job. Everything is bestowed on you by nature. Okay? So Marxism would seek to emphasize class struggle. That struggle. There are the commoners, there are the royals, there are the whites, there are the blacks, there are the southerners, there are the northerners. It's always a struggle. And we have to ensure that we come to the middle ground so that everybody will get their due. So those within this framework, research will try to look into an equal distribution of wealth. Because in society, you can afford, there are studies that have looked at an equal distribution of wealth between North and South. Those states, an equal distribution of wealth between developed and developing countries. All those studies are there. Then
how labor is exploited. And then also how some workers are alienated. Their voices are muted when it comes to decision-making processes. Then we have feminist perspective, very strong school, which will basically question patriarchal structures, especially most of the northern tribes, they live in patriarchal structures. So feminism will question that. Well, when it comes to inheritance, the gender inequalities are many. Okay, so and that is what will cause somebody, even though you are married and you have children, and you want to have a boy. Why? Why? Can you tell me why? You see that?
So the inheritance issue. The belief that if the woman married, you don't pay somebody's name. But if the man is born, if you keep the family name, that thinking is what makes people
You see that?
to have this son.
Yeah. So those are the structures that we seek to dismantle. That I can bequeath my property to my daughter, because her to my blood runs through her veins. It's the same blood that runs through her and then the boy. Okay, so CMS will still to dismantle that. A lot. So CMS wants you to join. You should join the movement so that we can reduce the workload. Okay, so issues that tend to marginalize women and also reinforce gender stereotypes and limit opportunities for advancement for women. Those studies are strongly criticized. Okay? So you will see feminist studies looking at gender pay gaps. We also look at what we call glass ceilings, okay? Sexual harassment. So you see, we are making progress here. So now almost every institution has a sexual harassment policy. So some achievements have been made by CMS. Yes, that you have to join. So that liberating voices is one of the pillars of CMS. In other words, give the voiceless a voice. Within the organization, give the one that is down there a voice. Should be able to participate in decision making. Should not always be that they will just be there and then they will say announcement. All they hear is announcement. This is what we have agreed. So take note and comply. No. CMS doesn't go with that. Okay. So emancipatory research will seek to empower marginalized groups, to give marginalized groups voice. So if I go and then I conduct a study on blind people, how they feel, I'm giving them a voice. A lot of researchers will shy away from conducting any research where the participants are all blind. Is it fair? It's not. They also have voices. So who will give them a voice? So CMS will do that.
I think that is what is affecting our structural design. Sometimes in the past,
yes,
when you are putting a story, you don't care whether
the
disabled person will use it or not.
Sure.
But now, whatever that you do, you must include them in the picture.
Yes.
In terms of the design. it has become accessible to all of them.
Ah.
For
Okay, thank you very much. You are right. So right now, it's a requirement that all, especially public structures. So I remember when the GTEC people came, they were asking us, you have to put disability-friendly structures here and there, a lot of trouble. Okay, but it's because at the time the building was put up, those voices were muted. Nobody cared whether somebody had to use wheelchair or whatever, no. But now those things have changed. Unfortunately, our time is up. Yes, oh, you
Just last week, I got a notification on my phone that I'm always at University for Development Studies graduate school. Does it have disability accessible routes? And I dismissed it. So if I had answered that straight away, they will use it to update their systems.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So CMS is making progress. Yes, it's making progress. So you have to come on board so that we can champion it. All right, so because of the fact that it's an evening lecture, I can't extend it so much. So we'll continue next week, God willing. Thank you.